Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for the organizers for an awesome day. My name is Milan Stokić. I come from HTEC Group. I'm head of technology currently there, and I'm going to talk the topic called Orchestrating Developer Delight, which talks about DevEx and a lot of stuff we heard today. Actually, you'll see a lot of parallels, especially, all the sessions today, but especially the first session, because the first slide has a quote from the same guy that the guys quoted at today's first presentation. So today I'll try to kind of bring closer DevEx and share a bit of our experience. So to start with it, we are a software delivery company and famous consultants from the first presentation of today. So the scary consultants out there. We develop for years and years in DevEx or something at least adjacent to DevEx. For today's topic, one of the key reasons for talking about this, why we are doing it at all, is that the systems that people work in, everything that we deal with, actually accounts for 90 to 90% of our performance. A quote again from the 1950s, and that plays well today for everything that we do, especially us in software delivery. And one important key thing for all of us is how do we approach and how do we improve performance? Well, first and foremost, I've tried always to stay away from calling this developer performance, engineering performance. I would like to think more of DevEx as engineering efficiency. Engineering efficiency can work as both a verb and a noun, because you're both influencing something, so your end goal, but you're also doing it. I like to think of a bit exactly like that. So you're engineering towards being more effective, and the engineering performance at the end just becomes an outcome. You're not building a KPI, you're not doing the scary things that makes the management, the C-level think that this is the goal, this is the KPI. We're building a foundation through DevEx that will allow the entire organization to have better performance. And to kind of give you an analogy to this and to today's talk, so me being a motorsport fan, I like this analogy because here we see actual three teams from motorsports that kind of have the same goal. They all want to win. But if the question is, do they do the same things to win? But well, most probably not. And there's a parallel to engineering also. So they all have a technology, they're high-performing teams, but at the end, they deal with different rules and regulations, different situations that they work with. So to give you an analogy, an F1 car will most probably not do very well on a rally stage. It will crash and burn. So in today's world, when we think about DevEx, there's a lot of talk about, hey, do exactly these things across your organization, and then you're going to do much, much better. You're going to have performance. And I think that it needs to change a bit, and the whole analogy plays well with it, because you don't want to take the best practices in play, because the best practices will actually only get you so far. You need to really think about your organization and what fits well for it in order to be performant. And I'll do a bit of a segue here and talk. A lot of people that have developed at least a bit into DevEx have saw this study from Stripe from 2018 that builds a very great case for why we need better developer performance. And they kind of did a calculation. Well, they first did a study exploring thousands of engineers and doing a survey where they calculated kind of how much does per developer GDP is and how much inefficiencies there are in those systems, with the gross calculation kind of coming to 300 billion in 2018. To be honest, the thing that I found is that there was a survey in 2013, but the numbers are still not out. But my kind of a gut feeling is that this got multiplied during the COVID part, because COVID part drove us into digital transformation, into more need for software. So the increase in the number of engineers was much greater compared to 2018. So if we calculate the corona effect, this number will most probably be much greater, because not much stuff has changed in the industry if we compare to 2018. And to talk a bit more into detail, so where all of those inefficiencies went, well, what's going on with majority of the system, and this is just one of the examples. I'm not saying that all of the organizations look like this, but if you look at the current state and what's happening, we can see that around 70% of overhead, which goes to people spending time trying to find information, having slow feedback loops, having cognitive friction, having developer experience friction, or at least the overall company or organization operating model is working against efficiencies. We're seeing kind of a value-add delivery going towards 30% and everything else, waste and friction to 70%, and the kind of goal of DevEx and everything that is happening around the movement is moving towards value-add delivery, kind of an optimal 60%, because we'll never remove the waste and friction from the system. There was a great slide with the guy pushing the box and pulling the box. There's always friction in a system. If we talk physics, it's just how much you optimize your system to reduce the amount of friction, so that the amount of effort going into a task is actually much lower than it is right now, so that you can, well, hopefully not the example we heard that people are just doing more work because they're getting optimized, to actually build greater quality into the system. And as me being a fan of Dilbert, here's another thing about best practices. So, and I'm going to talk a bit of our experience and how we went into DevEx and implementing engineering efficiencies. Is when you look at your organization and you decide to do something about it because you see those inefficiencies. Us as engineers, I like to think about it as the daily things that we complain about being slow or taking time away from our kind of our most important tasks. We would go into Google or right now ChatGPT and ask it, what do I do to improve DevEx at my company, or at least implement DevEx? And it's going to come up with something most probably called with industry best practices. Well, and I've been one of those people that used and abused that concept, and I've been a culprit of those. So we need to scale down a bit on best practices and start thinking about them. Don't take all the best practices possible in the world and start implementing them. Think about which of those best practices actually fit your organization and work well towards it, because it's going to give you at least a baseline or a starting point where you can at least get to a level where when you're building for the future. So then on top of those best practices, or mediocre best practices to call them, you can start building your own flavor on top of them for your organization. And one of the other pitfalls that we've seen, and I love, we've implemented DORA metrics, we're implementing space metrics, but they're great metrics to use to actually measure your team performances, but they tend to be a pitfall if they're only viewed as themselves. So you end up with measuring some of your or all of the DORA metrics, and you get the fancy dashboards, and you start finger pointing at pieces, or God forbid, start measuring team against team and comparing where they fit into that whole scale. And then you start dealing with pieces of it, or improving one of the metrics, and unfortunately you're just fixing kind of the symptom. You're not actually coming up with a cure. So even though they're important, the DORA metrics and space metrics, we still want to not only use them, but we want to go into different things. And one of the things that we've used in the past, and even recently, and it was also mentioned during a few keynotes today, at least during the first one, was the DX tool. So it's really important to start asking, and it's a kind of a maybe even a ridiculous concept, but start asking your developer community what you need to do, where are the problems. And these statistics here are not taken from one team. This is kind of the distribution of common problems seen within majority of teams that have used survey tools. And these really help you validate all of those quantitative metrics and also give you a bit of insight into where your organization is going and how your organization is feeling. And when we talk about, this is again a bit of a segue, but sharing some of the experiences we had when we started as consultants working with different companies. We were seeing certain patterns, and most probably majority of you will recognize either one of these in your organizations. And if you're kind of somewhere in the middle, then that's actually a good thing. So the first example of what we call DevOps chaos is something that was fully automated. Bring your own tools, choose whatever technology you want, whatever framework. Do whatever you want as a team. You have full decentralized decision making. And on the other hand, there's the manual tickets and long lead time system where everything needs to go through a certain ticket. SLAs are 3-5 days. You need to spend a lot of waiting time just to get something set up. And these are kind of no-brainers. They simply don't work in today's world. These are a bit scarier because it's hard to measure, and on the first look, everything might look okay, not just optimized, but like super performant. But as the system grows and as it builds these inefficiencies within it. They're not visible to the entire organization. So we try to go somewhere in the middle, and again, segue to previous presentations. There's the two guys pulling the rope and going towards kind of that federated setup instead of doing decentralized or centralized approach. Where we see also some of the pitfalls in the organizations, and this illustrates it in a very good way. When the cars were first introduced, there were a lot of people that said, I don't need a faster car, I just need a faster horse. And when you start dealing with some of these implementations, there's a lot of organizations that want to tackle some of the improvements incrementally. Build upon the existing stuff that we have. And at a certain point, you just need to pull the plug and say, what we have is so unoptimized, it's so obsolete that we just need to throw it away, and we need the car to actually be able to build in efficiencies into our system. And this brings me to a part of the talk of how do you do it, or how do we do it, and how it might help anybody else do it. But this is not a framework, this is just an approach that we usually take when we're dealing with implementation and helping companies with implementing DevEx. So we try to focus on data as the foundation, building in the lagging factors, those indicators that give us information about where we are and where we've been, the leading indicators that give us information where the problems might be. One of the leading indicators, as an example, can be long times for setting up local development environments, or long times for setting up a test environment, which tends to give you an indicator that your onboarding process is really unoptimized and you need to look at it and improve it. Then building in quantitative data, DORA metrics or space metrics are great, but you can build upon them. There's so many indicators that if you care about them, build them into your system. And then the qualitative survey, the survey is going to the developer community. Those are really, really important ones because they validate pretty much everything else around the data foundation. And only all four together give you a holistic view of your system. With that holistic view, you need to focus on three key areas: the people, the processes, and the technology. And in that three pieces, you're going to be able to create the most influence. And people always being not just the source of information and source of change, they're also our goal. And one of the other things that you can do or start with, and we use it in 100% of the cases, is using value stream mapping to actually start to build some of the indicators, because that's kind of a proven concept that's pretty cheap to implement and doesn't even require any tooling around it. It's just a Miro board and sitting with a team to actually map out some of these things and actually get you going forward without too much investment in it. This slide speaks more about how we tend to approach also the concepts, and we see it as kind of 3 key pillars, because not every team, not every company is ready to go all in at the beginning. Somebody wants to build a bit of a POC, somebody wants to actually just pull the plug and go all in. But 3 key pillars give us access and give us ability to build a feedback loop into our system. So starting with a tool-based approach, where we implement some of the tooling to actually enable the teams, get feedback, get information, then focus on the project and tool-based, which we start from, move from the individual influence to project level, and then at the end, platforms and systems. And we heard today a lot of talk about platforms. I think that was one of the words we heard today a lot, but that's actually something that has proven itself to be a very, very good approach, very good explanation of what you're trying to do. And as again, to emphasize, use value stream mapping. And on this example, you can see it's simply a big diagram, and it starts from a blank page that helps you, you go into talking with the teams, talking with multiple teams, starting filling up some of the boxes, and then giving them, these are ballpark estimates, they've got feelings, or they're already known information, how much time it takes for each individual piece. So things like, our onboarding takes 3 weeks, yeah, but then the question during the onboarding is, how much time does it take to actually get to a meaningful PR? Because some of the teams will tell you, hey, it takes us actually a week or 2 weeks to get to the first PR for the new team member, but what's that PR? Is it a small bug fix? Is it a typo that they fixed in the front end, or is it actually something meaningful? And then start thinking of, during the onboarding process, how much time did it take for the person to understand the system? How was that also implemented, and how was it a meaningful documentation, videos, or that somebody from the team actually needed to sit with that person for the entirety of the onboarding, and stuff like that. And then you look at for instance, here is an example, moving changes to production, or moving changes to your CI/CD. Usually, if these are slow, they indicate points of interest, and then with those points of interest, you can start to implement and fix inefficiencies in these pieces. So value stream mapping actually just gives you the first steps, indicators where to focus first, because the scary thing about DevEx tends to be the magnitude of changes that you need to implement. Using some of these tools actually allows you to pinpoint and start from smaller tasks. And you might end up with something looking like this at the end. So from kind of those crazy 2 examples of DevOps chaos to manual processes, you might see something looking like this, and at the center of it you can see that there's a unified platform that allows you to build in governance, build in self-serving tools that the teams can use, that actually helps them work more efficiently and be able to deliver the value, which is kind of our goal at the end. And with all of these things created, we are then at the point that we still see this situation happening within the teams. And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to say that interaction with people is bad. We are all social animals. It's actually Even in the previous panel talks about should we be back at the office or shouldn't we be back at the office. I agree that this kind of a face-to-face interaction is very important, but this is still waste if all of the questions that this person has were already answered multiple times by somebody from this group. So this is still waste if I need to do all of these stuff to find out how do I set up my CI/CD, or where do I get the Docker images that I need? All of those questions need to be somehow built into and easy to access in order to remove waste, so that all of these stop being waste and they become meaningful. They become a part of that value process for a company, so that the engineers engaging with each other are not talking of how do I do this thing that people already done in the company. They're talking about how can we improve things. They're coming up with ideas, they're experimenting, they're trying out new things. And how you can achieve it, and we're back at, again, the platform and the developer platform or the developer portal. You start building meaningful documentation. And it can be just a simple wiki, it can be API documentation, it can be anything that you find meaningful, that the teams, again, deal with every day. The key important thing of all of these, make that documentation close to code, because that allows the teams to keep the documentation up to date. And for us, a very good tool and solution for majority of these problems for the developer platform has been Spotify's Backstage. It's an open source tool. I'm not an advocate for them or anything like that. It's just proven itself to be a very, very meaningful tool. It's open source and it's also very flexible to extend. It has a plugin architecture that allows you to build whatever you need around it, and it comes with a lot of features that you don't have to build. So use it and abuse it. And once you have this, once you have all of these things set up, then you can start talking about these things. I know AI has been a topic of the day also, and companies tend, and especially C-levels today, tend to always use AI as a clutch, and try not to allow them to do this. In our experience, building on top of a foundation that you have and then plugging in AI, things like semantic searches or retrieval augment generation architecture that helps your developer community get to those answers much quicker, understand the context better, is a great way to introduce AI to your teams. To be honest, what we saw from the recent surveys that we had and experiences, introducing things like code assistance hasn't really improved that much in developer performance. It actually introduces some things that are worrisome at this point, but still no indicators and metrics of what that actually is. And how do we actually do some things? And this is kind of a very, very abstracted architecture of the system. Build in platform capabilities, whatever they may be, accelerators, templates, whatever comes to mind, whatever works for your teams. Have a platform team that deals with the platform capabilities. Inner sourcing is an awesome concept that helps build upon this, but never throw the platform to your developer community and say, deal with this. So have a platform team, and then in this case we've called it a hive mind, but this is basically a knowledge management that contains all of the knowledge of the organization, all the documentation, and has a feedback loop that allows for all the users of it to actually correct it and give it feedback back into the system that the system corrects itself. You have a development community that actually feeds all of the information into it, and then again, AI, but simply use it carefully and use it for the things that you needed. Don't put AI into every piece of software that's possible around this thing. And to do a brief recap of what the whole process looks like is start with surveys and assessments, gathering metrics, do a value stream mapping, then identify areas of focus, then you do and assess the solution and calculate build cost savings. This has proven for us as a very good tool to actually try and get the C-level on board. For engineering community, it might sound scary, but it's basically an ROI calculator. So return of investment. Look at how much it costs not to be efficient. And if you invest this much into this, you're going to get this much back. And it can be a very, very ballpark estimate, but it helps bridge it to the business and for the business to understand why we need to do this. Then define value metrics that you can measure and articulate the business value of actual implementation. Decide to measure, then continuously measure outcomes, and whatever the outcomes tell you, again, iterate and keep iterating upon it. So assess, define value, simulate ROI, and then deliver the value to the organization. And a couple of things for the end of the presentation. We have a kind of a neatly figured calculation here that puts developer experience, developer satisfaction, removal of waste and friction gives you developer productivity. But majority of organizations will focus on this. But please don't focus here, focus down here, because it's the people, processes, and technologies that are going to actually influence the success of your developer productivity. And for the message for the developer community, because if you're going to go into implementing DevEx into your organization, you are going to need to be the advocate. You need to build a culture, you need to build also a community around it that will help preach about the benefits of it. And the message to the development community is always going to be, trust me, it's not a train, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, it's just the tunnel is really long. And if I can leave you with one quote for today, it's this awesome quote and a wonderful quote from Creative Space Framework. Introduce more joy into the developers' lives, because that will give you the most benefits at the end. So thank you all for listening, and I think I'll have some time for any questions if anybody has them.
Me again. Hi. I guess a question around the leading and the lagging metrics. It was first on that diagram. Mm-hmm. What we found when we started this is that starting with the metrics was the wrong approach. And I think there was another talk here that mentioned that maybe don't start with the metrics first, whereas in this it was like the very first thing there, identify them.
For us, it's first deciding on which metrics you care about and then start measuring them. So that's kind of the message there. So, and it heavily depends on the organization that you're working with. So you can always go in a different direction. What we saw in our previous experiences, literally every organization is a living organism, and you need to treat it completely differently. It depends on the size of your team, the culture of your team, the product itself that you're building, the business model, of course. Well, you know, if you're a startup and you experiment, you care about different things than a enterprise company of like 5,000 engineers. Thank you.
Any more questions? No? You all need a beer. It's okay, we understand. I feel this. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, everyone.
Cool.